Mick Jagger, the iconic frontman of the Rolling Stones, has spent decades at the pinnacle of rock music. Known for his electrifying performances, magnetic charisma, and enduring influence, Jagger is one of the most recognizable figures in music history. With a career spanning over 6 decades, he has witnessed countless bands rise and fall, shaping his opinion of what truly deserves respect in the world of rock. But behind the swagger and showmanship, Mick Jagger has never been shy about his opinions. While the public often sees him as a larger-than-life performer, those closest to him know that he has strong, sometimes controversial, views about his peers. Throughout his career, Jagger has privately, and occasionally publicly, spoken about bands he couldn't stand, naming those he felt were overrated, uninspired, or creatively bankrupt. These aren't just casual critiques, they reveal a side of Mick Jagger rarely seen by fans. As a man who has spent his life creating music that defined generations, he has little patience for acts he considers lazy, derivative, or lacking the raw energy that makes rock music vital. From manufactured pop bands to self-indulgent rockers, Jagger's disdain cuts across genres and eras. The list of bands Mick Jagger allegedly hated tells a story about his uncompromising standards, his passion for authenticity, and his commitment to the rebellious, transformative power of rock. For anyone who assumed Jagger loved every peer in the industry, the truth is far more surprising, and at times, shocking. By exploring the 6 bands that earned Jagger's disdain, we get a glimpse into the mind of rock's most enduring frontman, and why his judgments have both fascinated and alarmed fans for decades. Mick Jagger, the legendary frontman of the Rolling Stones, has never been content to simply ride the wave of fame. From the early days of the British invasion in the 1960s, Jagger cultivated not just a persona but a philosophy about music, one that values raw energy, authenticity, and the ability to push boundaries. He has always believed that rock music should challenge its audience, provoke thought, and reflect the chaos and intensity of real life. Anything less, in his eyes, was unworthy of the title of rock. Jagger's perspective has been shaped by decades of experience on the front lines of music history. He witnessed bands that succeeded commercially but lacked artistic depth, and others who gained critical acclaim while failing to connect with audiences on a visceral level. Through it all, Jagger developed a keen sense of judgment, a set of standards that determined who he respected, and who he didn't. Unlike many celebrities, he has been willing to voice his opinions openly, at least in private circles, demonstrating that fame does not soften his critical eye. This philosophy also explains why certain bands earned his ire. Jagger's disdain was rarely personal, it was about principle. Bands that focused on commercial success over the first of the 6 bands on Jagger's hate list embodies many of the traits he despised: commercialism, lack of originality, and a tendency to imitate rather than innovate. Understanding why Jagger singled out this band, and those that followed, requires an appreciation of his exacting standards, his intense devotion to the craft of performance, and his vision of rock as an art form, not just entertainment. In this chapter, we set the stage for exploring the first band that Mick Jagger allegedly hated, highlighting the reasons behind his disdain and the principles that guided his judgments. These early critiques not only reveal his uncompromising philosophy but also provide insight into the kind of music and artistry he has spent decades championing with the Rolling Stones. Mick Jagger's criticism of other bands has always been rooted in his uncompromising philosophy: rock music should be raw, authentic, and fearless. While some artists became household names for their commercial appeal, Jagger privately dismissed those who he felt lacked the honesty, creativity, or daring that made rock meaningful. Among the first 2 bands on his list, it becomes clear that his standards were exacting and sometimes ruthless. The first band that reportedly earned Jagger's disdain was the Bay City Rollers. Known for their polished pop-rock sound and teen-focused image, the Rollers represented the very commercialization of music Jagger despised. To him, they were manufactured stars, carefully marketed to appeal to pre-teens rather than audiences seeking genuine artistry. While the band achieved massive popularity in the 1970s, Jagger reportedly found their music soulless, criticizing the lack of risk and the superficiality of both their lyrics and stage presence. He viewed the phenomenon surrounding them, the hysteria of fans and the marketing machine, as emblematic of an industry that valued profit over creative authenticity. For Jagger, the Bay City Rollers were the antithesis of the Rolling Stones' raw energy and artistic experimentation. The second band that drew his ire was ABBA, the Swedish pop sensation famous for catchy hooks, elaborate harmonies, and perfectly produced songs. While millions adored their music, Jagger reportedly had little patience for their polished, almost antiseptic approach. He felt that ABBA's success was a product of studio precision and image crafting rather than genuine artistry. In his eyes, the emotional depth and rawness that define rock were missing entirely. For a man who had spent decades pouring his energy, vulnerability, and charisma into live performances, ABBA's glossy perfection was not music, it was entertainment packaged for mass consumption. Jagger's disdain for these bands was not personal, it was principled. He respected artists who took risks, experimented, and created a genuine connection with their audience. Bands that prioritized commercial appeal, safety, or image over substance were, in his mind, failing. These first two bands illustrate a pattern. Jagger's critiques were rooted in a desire for authenticity, risk, and emotional honesty. Commercial success alone was never enough to earn his respect, and he was unafraid to voice his contempt for artists who, in his eyes, compromised the integrity of music. As we continue, the remaining bands on Jagger's list reveal even more about his exacting standards, showing how he measured artistry, talent, and authenticity against the high bar set by his own decades-long career at the forefront of rock and roll. As Mick Jagger's career with the Rolling Stones progressed, his opinions about other bands became sharper and more defined. By the mid-1970s, he had witnessed countless acts rise and fall, and his private list of bands he disliked, or outright hated, was guided by a single principle: authenticity matters. Jagger respected artistry that pushed boundaries and challenged audiences, but he had little patience for bands he felt were shallow, derivative, or overly concerned with image and commercial success. One band that reportedly drew Jagger's disdain was Kiss. Known for their elaborate makeup, theatrical performances, and larger-than-life stage antics, Kiss became one of rock's most visually recognizable bands. But for Jagger, their spectacle overshadowed substance. He reportedly admired their showmanship but criticized the lack of emotional or musical depth behind the theatrics. While the average fan marveled at their costumes and pyrotechnics, Jagger was concerned that the band prioritized gimmicks over the raw, visceral energy that defined true rock and roll. In his eyes, music should challenge, provoke, and communicate genuine human emotion, things that Kiss, despite their commercial success, often neglected. Another band that earned Jagger's disapproval was the Village People. Famous for their themed costumes and disco hits, they represented the commercialization and packaging of music for mass appeal, something Jagger had long criticized. While their catchy songs made them a pop culture phenomenon, Jagger reportedly found their work to be overly manufactured and lacking authenticity. For a performer who spent decades pouring charisma, energy, and artistry into live shows, the Village People's approach epitomized the kind of music that prioritized image and trend over substance and risk. Jagger saw them as an example of the industry favoring spectacle over artistry, a trend that frustrated him as a musician committed to genuine performance. It's important to note that Jagger's disdain was rarely personal. He wasn't attacking the musicians themselves, he acknowledged their talent, work ethic, and ability to entertain. Instead, his criticisms were philosophical, reflecting his belief that music should do more than just appeal to the masses. It should challenge, inspire, and evoke raw emotion. Bands that relied on gimmicks, commercial formulas, or image-driven marketing failed to meet this standard, and in Jagger's eyes, they represented a decline in artistic integrity within the industry. Jagger's private opinions about these bands also reveal his ongoing tension with the commercial music world. While the Rolling Stones achieved massive success, they were never content to rest on formulaic hits. Jagger's relentless drive for innovation and authenticity often put him at odds with trends he deemed shallow or contrived. He saw many contemporary acts as emblematic of an industry rewarding superficial appeal rather than true musical innovation, which made it difficult for him to respect bands that fit that mold. These examples, Kiss and the Village People, highlight a pattern in Jagger's evaluations. He valued risk, honesty, and the ability to connect with audiences on a deeper level. Bands that relied on spectacle, formula, or gimmickry were, in his mind, missing the core essence of what music should achieve. This uncompromising standard not only defined his opinions but also helped shape the Rolling Stones' enduring reputation as a band committed to authenticity, even decades into their career. As we approach the final chapter, the last two bands on Jagger's list reveal the extremes of his standards, showcasing his unflinching views on musical integrity and why certain popular acts simply could not earn his respect. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, Mick Jagger's opinions about the music industry had crystallized. Having spent decades at the top of rock music, he had seen countless bands rise, dominate the charts, and fade away. But while some acts earned his respect, others consistently drew his criticism. The final two bands on his infamous hate list exemplify why Jagger's standards were so exacting. For him, music was more than entertainment, it was a vehicle for truth, emotion, and rebellion. One of the bands that consistently frustrated Jagger was the Carpenters. Known for their clean, soft pop sound and meticulously produced hits, the Carpenters were commercial successes with a massive fan following. However, Jagger reportedly found their music overly polished, predictable, and lacking the emotional intensity that he valued in rock. While their vocal harmonies were technically impressive, he felt the songs were sanitized and emotionally shallow. For a performer who built his career on raw energy, risk, and authenticity, the Carpenters represented everything he believed was wrong with commercial music, a focus on perfection and mass appeal over genuine expression. Jagger respected. The final band on Jagger's list was arguably the most telling, ABBA's contemporaries in mainstream pop, though some sources suggest he included ABBA again due to their dominance in pop culture. Regardless, this inclusion highlights Jagger's frustration with trends that prioritized catchiness, image, and studio perfection over risk-taking and artistic depth. For him, bands like these were emblematic of a music industry that rewarded commercialism above creativity. Their songs, while beloved by the public, did not challenge the listener, and they lacked the chaotic energy and edge that defined true rock. Jagger's disdain underscores his lifelong commitment to authenticity and the belief that music should evoke real emotion, not just entertain. Jagger's judgments, though harsh, were rooted in principle. He wasn't attacking the musicians personally, he respected their talent, work ethic, and ability to entertain massive audiences. Instead, he was critiquing the values that these bands represented, the prioritization of image, formula, and commercial success over honesty, risk, and artistic integrity. In his eyes, music should push boundaries, provoke thought, and connect with the audience on a deeper level, standards that many mainstream acts failed to meet. These final two bands complete the picture of Jagger's uncompromising philosophy. His disdain for commercial pop and overly polished acts reflects his dedication to rock's original spirit, raw, unfiltered, and fearless. While fans may be shocked by his list, it serves as a window into the mindset of a man who has spent decades creating music that continues to defy expectations, inspire generations, and set a high bar for authenticity. In conclusion, Mick Jagger's hate list is less about bitterness and more about conviction. It reveals a frontman who is deeply principled, unafraid to voice his opinions, and fiercely protective of the values he believes define music at its best. For Jagger, the bands he disdained are a reminder of the difference between mere entertainment and true artistry, an essential distinction that has guided his career and ensured that the Rolling Stones remain one of the most respected and enduring rock bands in history.